And here we go. We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Traveling up. Roger, planet.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Fighting downside SPD off. Bring in SPD off. It's orange!
Orange 45! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage.
What is it?
Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You good? We don't need any more of these.
Good morning, everyone. You are looking at a live view of the Falcon 9 rocket at pad Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. Today we are bringing you a live stream of the Starlink Group 5-12 mission, which will bring 56 Starlink satellites to low Earth orbit. It looks like we're getting a bunch of 5x5s in chat, so thank you everybody for that. And reminder, if you want to ask us a question, you can tag at NASASpaceflight in chat, and we have fancy software that will add it to our backend, in which case we will then ask your question on the live stream. I am joined by two people today. First, Alex. Alex, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. I ironically just woke up because I feel like I'm like on Eastern time. But surely enough, I'm ready to go, and I'm very pumped up for today's launch. Because it's another Starlink. No, it's not just another Starlink. It's the last launch for SpaceX in this first half of the year. The next launch is already going to be on the next half. That's exciting because now we can review how things went.
Yeah, we'll get there in just a sec, but also joining us and giving us this awesome live view is Max Evans. Max, how are you doing today?
Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm doing very well this morning. The weather is clearing up nicely, and I'm ready to see SpaceX ready to fly for, I believe, the 43rd time of 2023.
Yeah, so speaking of that, Alex, could you give us a quick rundown on this mission, please?
Surely. So, as you already mentioned, this is the Starlink Group 5-12 mission. It is launching 56 Starlink V1.5 satellites into the Starlink's second generation constellation. That is the one where they're launching these V2 mini satellites, but for this one is only the V1.5 satellite version. By the way, this is going to be the third to last, I think, of all the launches. So there's going to be 2 more launches of this kind of satellite, and then everything else is just going to be like all of the other Starlink satellites launching in the foreseeable future are going to be of the V2 mini version, at least until Starship is able to carry the full-size V2 and whatever other things that they might come up with, maybe a V10 or something at one point, yes. So the rocket that you see on your screen, you can see that the booster is sooty, right? That is a previously flown booster. It is B1069. It is launching on its 8th time, its 8th launch. Previously launched missions like CRS-24, few Starlink missions, SES-18, OneWeb 15, etc., etc. So it's already a very flight-proven booster, let's say. It will be landing, as usual, for these boosters on Just Read the Instructions, which is located about 639 kilometers downrange in the Atlantic Ocean. We probably can look at the sort of trajectory later in more detail, but it's launching to the southeast, just like pretty much every other Starlink mission from the Cape lately, and fueling has just begun, as I've heard on the ComsNet right now. So we're already underway with that countdown sequence and all the propellant load and everything. So hopefully we see a launch in just under 34 minutes. There we go.
Yeah, and on that note, earlier SpaceX tweeted that the weather is roughly 40% go for launch during this window. So Max, how is the weather out at the Cape today?
So as we know, SpaceX opted to delay the T0 this morning to its second window, and that was because the weather this morning was absolutely terrible. Excuse me. On my drive into the Kennedy Space Center this morning, I was greeted by a very dark and ominous shelf cloud over the Kennedy Space Center, moving directly eastward. So, not ideal conditions to go flying in, but at this current time, the skies seem to be clearing up nicely, and hopefully it holds.
Yeah, and on that note, we have a $2 super chat from Music of Wolves, a regular on our stream, saying good weather fund. So thank you very much for that support, Music of Wolves. You're always here and we appreciate it. Also from Music of Wolves, a good question for Alex. Are the fairings new on today's flight?
Well, we know at least one of the fairing house is flying for its 10th time on this mission, which will be a record for the company, because like the highest flight number for the fairing house so far has been 9, and that has happened on at least 3 flights. It has already crossed that mark at least 3 times. But now there's one of those fairing house that already reached 9 flights that now is flying for another time, and therefore it's reaching 10 flights, which is quite amazing to consider that there's one fairing house that has flown more times than the booster, and the booster is like on its 8th launch, which is crazy.
Yeah, so right, the Falcon 9 has 2 fairing halves, the passive and the active half. Do you know which half is flying for the 10th time, and could you run us through the difference between passive and active?
Yeah, so correct. The passive half is sort of the one that just basically stays in place, whereas the active one has all the pneumatics and pusher systems and things like that to be able to push away the whole bag of the both fairing halves. I believe the passive half is the one that is closer to the strong bag, the gray structure next to the rocket there on your screen, and the other one, like the active half, is the opposite. It like, I will bet right now like $5 or something that I'm probably wrong and it's the opposite, because it tends to happen to me. But I'm very sure that that is the case, that the passive one is the one closest to the strong bag, and the other one is the active one with all the equipment to push the both halves apart during flight. So, yep. I do not know though which one is which in terms of the flights of each one. I do know one of them is at least 10 flights.
Yeah, that's an exciting milestone. I know Elon tweeted about that probably at the end of 2020, saying that they were hoping to reach 10 flights this year or next year, and here in 2023 we finally got there. So on that note, as we mentioned, today is SpaceX's 43rd launch of the year, and as Alex also mentioned, this will be the last launch of half one. So as we're halfway through the year, Westy the Third asks, how are we looking for the record-breaking launch cadence of the year?
Yeah, I actually was tasked with that, with writing an article just all about it. I hope at least the mods in chat can put that out. It's a very long one, but I go a little bit into what sort of the challenges that the SpaceX has had in the past 6 months. Because if you look at the numbers, they are a little bit behind, just a little. It's not like a huge thing that that they're going behind, but it's true that if they keep this cadence, they're not going to reach 100 launches, right? So what happened? Well, one of the things that I mentioned is how at Vandenberg, during the early months of the year, they had really bad weather. There was this sort of, I think they were calling it atmospheric river or something like that. It was
Yes,
a very horrible.
There was
look at
31
that, Jack.
atmospheric rivers. It rained more than it's rained in forever, and I was in Texas for the entire time and missed all of the fun. But yes, that
Jack
happened.
has
31 atmospheric rivers.
hijacked.
Anyways, bye.
Yeah, Jack has hijacked the stream for a minute there, but it's true that the weather had been very non-cooperative for these launches, and so they had a very rough start of the year in terms of the cadence there. And the moment you start, slacking at the start of the year, if you run the numbers, it's really hard to then compensate. Thankfully, they're compensating it now with record turnaround times of like 9 days or even less that they're planning. So hopefully in the next half of the year they're going to compensate that. I go into detail as well of the drone ship availability at the East Coast. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge there this summer because there's a Falcon Heavy mission, EchoStar 24, that is launching, and it's going to feature a double drone ship landing. Once that happens, as you can imagine, they cannot launch these Starlink missions unless they do a return to land site landing for the booster, or they just expand it. And so I sort of talk about that. I also mentioned a few of the notable missions that are coming up as well. So do check that out because I go in way more detail than we could probably go here in the little time that we have until launch.
Yeah, so another interesting thing that you mentioned in the article was if they keep their current cadence, we're looking at roughly 91 launches this year, which is remarkable. However, cadence in the second half of the year is generally quicker, so you're estimating roughly 95 to 99, somewhere in there. So it's remarkable how close SpaceX is reaching to their goal.
Yeah. I mean, it's what I just said, right? That it's true that it's going to be a challenge to reach 100, but even then, they're going to probably reach 90 without any sort of complication. As long as they keep launching successfully and at this rate, they might be able to reach 90, which is already like, wow, right? It's already impressive.
Yeah, so on that note, Elisar Prowl asks, with the delay in the launch day, will SpaceX still break the turnaround time for Slick 40?
Yeah, it will still be a record. I haven't run the numbers. I'm really sorry because I just basically woke up like 20 minutes before the delay, and I've been working on other stuff. You'll see that stuff soon because it's the tweets video this week in spaceflight. So you'll see it soon. But yeah, I haven't had the chance to run the numbers. It's still less than the record. It's like 4 days and something hours, which is less than the 5 days and it's something around the lines. Yeah, 5 days, 1 hour and 16 minutes is the current record. So it will be 4 days and still a few hours. It pretty much breaks the record. Yeah.
Yeah, it's insane how quickly the pad's being turned around this year. SpaceX has some hard workers out at the Cape. But quickly, we'll go through some gifted memberships. Westy the Third gifted 5 Red Team memberships, so if you got one of those, please make sure to thank him in chat. And thank you, Westy, for the support. We really appreciate it. Also, Jim Cavett donated 5 Red Team memberships as well. Corey donated 5 Red Team memberships as well. Thank you very much for that. Born Too Soon donated 1 Red Team membership. Thank you for your support. And hopefully you don't mean that you were born too soon to, say, see humans on Mars or something like that. We have a super chat from Ryan Weber. Trevor, Alex, and Max fan club. The Cape always has cruel summer weather. Yeah, thank you, Ryan. Thanks for the kind words. And as Max was alluding to, the weather is certainly pretty nasty this morning, but thankfully it seems to be getting better.
I mean, it's not literally cool per se, because it does get quite sweltering in the summer and quite bipolar because, rainy season, but yes.
Yeah. Another super chat from Vanishing Image saying, just wanted to say thanks for all your crew does and to bring us the great content. Thank you very much for your support. It is our honor to bring this to you. Then we have another question here that Alex can answer. Is today's mission using a stubby MVAC?
No, and for all I know, it's very, very unlikely that we're going to see any stubby MVAC on a Starlink mission. Because for a Starlink missions, what SpaceX tries to do is just cram as many satellites as they can into that fairing into that fairing. Boy, I was thinking of the fairing halves today. And so what you're going to see is that it's actually limited by mass right now. Initially, when they were launching the initial Starlink satellites, they were constrained by volume on the fairing, but now they're constrained by mass, and they have actually tried to increase the performance of Falcon 9 on these Starlink missions to fit as many satellites as they could. So you're not going to see the stubby MVAC on these missions unless there's something weird going on that mission. which could still happen. It's SpaceX after all. they're experts at weird, right? So it could still happen, but the likelihood is very, very small, and it's because the stubby MVAC, because it is shorter nozzle, the performance of the engine decreases because of the expansion. It's not taking the basically it stops being optimized for the vacuum of space. It's not that it stops functioning in the vacuum of space. Some people kind of confuse the sea level and vacuum variance as, the sea level doesn't work on vacuum. That's not true. It's actually more efficient than in sea level. But the thing of the vacuum optimized engine is that it is optimized for that environment. It actually takes into account that, it's a different environment. There's no atmospheric pressure or anything like that. So it actually takes into account that. And with the short MVAC, it doesn't take into account that. And so it loses performance, and the Falcon 9 just cannot throw as many satellites as it will otherwise, right? And so you won't see that on Starlink missions, again, unless there's some kind of weird thing going on.
Yeah, I really hope at some point SpaceX is, in their next payload user's guide talks about the performance decrease that they have from the new nozzle design, but that may be me dreaming. We have some questions regarding the Starlink constellations. Pure Cosmos asks, can SpaceX use V2 mini satellites for Gen 1 orbit, for example Group 2 and 3? And then on that same note, do the V1.5 and V2 mini satellites both go to the same orbits? Could you just talk a little bit about that, Alex?
Oh, that's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Do the V1.5 and V2 mini sets go? So the initial part. So the Falcon 9 releases the satellites into a preliminary orbit, and then they raise their orbits to a final orbit. The final orbit is the same for the Group 5 and Group 6 missions that we've seen, right? This is going to be sort of like, there's this mission and then 2 more of V1.5 satellites, and then that's it. For that variant of satellites, then it's all going to be V2 minis. But for now, they're all launching to the same orbit in the second generation constellation. For the first generation constellation, there were many shells, many different orbits, and you could sort of kind of see it in the nomenclature of the missions. There were ones that were Group 2, Group 3, Group 4. Those were going to different orbits. Whereas these, even though ones are like Group 5 and Group 6, it still goes to the same orbit. It's just different satellite configurations. So Group 5 is V1.5, and Group 6 missions are V2 minis. We could probably do like a short video on like how to recognize what kind of Starlink mission you're looking at. But then again, in like 1 week, all of the missions are going to be Starlink V2 minis. So why bother, right? But that's sort of the general rule. And I think I covered that. The previous one was about launching V2 minis to Starlink Gen 1. Yeah, can a SpaceX use? So that is a good question, and they actually have. Oh, by the way, that's the T-20 minute event. I totally forgot about that. They have just loaded all of the kerosene on the second stage tank, and they are now purging the line on the stromback on that gray structure to the next of the vehicle, and soon they're going to be going into LUX load on the second stage as well. They are purging and basically cooling down these lines for the start of that liquid oxygen load. So I was saying they have already filed for paperwork with the Federal Communications Commission for that. The only thing that will need to happen is both that the FCC grants approval of that, and also that they don't backtrack on that, because they have asked many things to the FCC, and then they feel like, you know what, we're not gonna do that. So it's very often that they do that. So we'll have to see if they actually do it. Yeah.
Yeah, SpaceX is. I seems like every other month SpaceX files something with the FCC regarding changes to the Starlink constellation, which I find quite interesting.
There's like a whole forum thread about that if you're curious. Not sure if mods are gonna have like the time to search for it. But there's like a whole section just about the Starlink FCC permits and discussions of what's launching, what's not launching. So there you go, Chris. I've already pinned the forum. Hope you're happy.
Yeah, next we just talk about shuttle, and then Chris will be really happy with us. So here's one that we'll give to Max first and go around the room. Toaster Chip asks, when do you think SpaceX will entirely phase out Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy for Starship? Their prediction is in the 2030s. Max, what do you think?
I would probably agree with that. I mean, it would take a lot for the Falcon 9 to be phased out completely because, of course, Starship has become first commercially operational, and then, of course, Starship has to be crew rated in its form. So, and with Falcon 9 as robust and reliable as it is now, easily another decade at least. So I would say I would probably agree with that.
Yeah, how many missions do you think Falcon 9 is going to be at before it's retired?
Yes. Many, but potentially hundreds, if not thousands of more, because Falcon's got a lot of life left in her. So,
Yeah.
it's difficult. It's difficult to put an exact number on it, or even a rough number on it, but many.
Yeah. Alex, what do you think?
Oh boy, these kind of questions. See, Trevor is hosting for the first time. He probably figure out soon that that's a bad question to ask me. So it's probably gonna last until the early 2030s, I think, because the military at least likes to have this capability, and we are not sure. Like, really, no one is sure if if a Starship is gonna be launching this kind of frequently. Because even when it is launching, it is cheap and everything. It's also the cadence, right? Whether it's being rapidly reused and things like that. If it's launching, but it's launching like maybe 20 times, when Falcon 9 is launching like 100 times, you're like, well, Falcon 9 is more available, right? So I can think of a scenario where we go into the early 2030s and Falcon 9 is still flying. By the way, you can see there that the T-20 event has stopped. That indicates that the liquid oxygen load on the second stage has begun. And I've actually heard the call out on the nets, so there you go. Double confirmation.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, Falcon 9 is pretty much free cadence until Starship is, launching several times a day. So I don't see it being phased out for early to mid 2030s as well.
Yeah, and people think like, oh well, that would be horrible because it's Starship and whatnot. Look, if SpaceX were to pivot completely to Starship, can you imagine how how chaotic that will be? Because they will only have a Starship, and then it's like in that situation where I mentioned, where they don't follow on with Falcon 9 and they pivot completely to Starship, they will drop in the cadence, they will drop in the revenue. It will be very horrible for the company. Whereas having both systems for as long as they can until they can fully take over with the Starship, it's very, very convenient for them because they can get more money. So
Yeah. So speaking of the transporter rector, where you were just talking about the T-minus 20-minute event, Murray asks, why is it that Slick 40 can do a 5-day turnaround, but Vandenberg takes, closer to 10 days?
Yeah, we're not fully sure how the sort of work that they do at Vandenberg looks like. It is true, though, on the last mission that they performed from Vandenberg, SpaceX had this thing on Twitter with multiple feeds and everything, and people find out that suddenly the Stromberg at Vandenberg gets burned out on every launch. Like, it really gets a beating from that from the Falcon 9, and that's the reason why we see here at Florida both of the Cape launch pads have that throwback maneuver at liftoff. Instead of just retracting 45 degrees or actually less, it's actually 30 degrees from vertical at Vandenberg. Instead of retracting a little bit and leaving it there all the way through liftoff, they just retract it a little bit and then throw it back at liftoff, and that's what actually avoids all of the mess that you can see at Vandenberg. That it's probably why in like partially they cannot turn around Vandenberg as fast as they can, but still it's not a huge deal if you think about it. If you can launch every 10 days, that it's about like that's more than 30 launches per year.
Hey, sometimes
a lot of
launch
launches.
pads can make a little bit of extra fire as a treat. It's okay. Don't disparage that.
Yeah. Hijacking. We need to coin that. Make like a
Coin that term,
Chris,
hijacking.
yeah. A Nightbot command. Probably Chris is gonna make that.
Yeah. We have a $50 super chat from Bideford saying, "You all don't realize how much I appreciate your fantastic coverage as I started watching in the 60s NASA, but this is so much cooler. Thank you, and hugs to all NSF." Thank you very much. That is very generous support, and we very much appreciate it. It allows us to bring you these awesome live views like Max is bringing us right now, so thank you again. Another gifted membership from admin. So again, if you've been gifted a sub, please thank them in chat, and thank you. Musical Wolves with another super chat. Music Wolves always has so many fantastic questions. Is the T-minus 20-minute vent quieter than a Starship vent? Do we have any data on that, Alex?
I'm gonna defer that to Max, and the reason why I'm deferring that to Max is because he's probably set up remotes, but I don't know if he has set up video remotes, because those will capture the sound. I have no idea about the sound. I'm not even there. I haven't been there at all.
And you should probably change that in the near future and get over here. But in terms of the question, to this point, I haven't yet set a video camera on the launch pad to get video, but I know that certain venting around the pad and from Falcon 9 itself has actually triggered my ops sound triggers on the cameras before. So venting can be quite loud, but it's difficult to make that comparison directly to Starship because a lot of the cameras that people had up close to the Starship launch are no more. And plus, and also during testing, I'm sure you can also tune into Starbase Live and get live audio feeds as well, and you can hear how angry actually the ship and booster actually sound when they're venting. It is quite loud.
Yeah, especially from some of the pad audio, sometimes it's quite deafening. Yes, we have another question from Second Stage Anomaly. Hopefully that's not what we see anytime soon. Could SpaceX change the size of the Falcon 9 or Falcon Heavy fairings for larger or smaller payloads?
Well, they do have an option for a longer fairing. I do not think they have any options for a wider fairing or like less wider, I guess narrower fairing. I don't think they have that capability. They do advertise on their payload users guide the sort of option for a longer fairing. I do not know though what kind of missions, other than maybe a couple of missions down the line from now, might use it. I'm not even sure if there's any commercial customer that will even be looking at using it, because frankly, there's not a lot of satellites that will need it. And once you start getting to that point with commercial customers, you're like, well, commercial customers are probably more willing to take a ride on Starship, right? There's actually one customer already with like conventional satellite that is riding on Starship. So, that might be the case as well. Yeah, they advertise that, but, at the end of the day, might actually just wait around a little bit and wait for Starship.
Yeah. Well, if you want to celebrate watching this awesome stuff, head on over to shop.nasaspaceflight.com, and for today's launch, you can look at the launch entry and landing shirt, just like the Falcon 9 that's on your screen is going to do shortly, with the 9 engines during launch on the far left, the 3 engines during the entry burn in the middle, and the singular landing burn engine on the right, which we'll hopefully see Falcon 9 do in a little under 10 minutes. And keep in mind, when you order while we are live, you can leave a message, as Patrick is showing on screen right now. And
That's not true, Patrick.
you should say that Endeavour is the best shuttle.
Endeavour, yeah.
And then,
Discovery's
we'll read out
the
your
best shuttle.
message.
You're all wrong. It's Atlantis.
Oh, come on, Jack. Endeavour is in the West Coast. Wouldn't you say
Atlantis,
West Coast?
Atlantis flew the most classified missions.
Come on. Anywho,
Discovery,
I know... Go ahead, Max.
Discovery had both return to flight missions. So
What's that
Yeah.
about?
Why do I feel like we've started a war in chat now?
Yeah, another neat thing about this piece of merch that I really like, and you probably appreciate that as well, Trevor, is that the engines that are, on the layout for the entry burn, you could in theory just make up any sort of different layout because it's just 3 engines, right? So it could be the center engine and then another 2 random engines. But those on the layout there are the actual engines that ignite for the entry burn. It's E1 and E5, 2 of the outer engines, and they're not just any other engine. It's those 2 engines in particular, and that's sort of what you will see if you were looking at the booster when it is horizontal in the pan. The engine layout will be that, and it is actually those 2 engines that ignite on the outer ring of 8 engines.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
an awesome touch.
Very accurate.
See, I think we need another one that has 1 engine for the entry burn and then 131 for landing burn, since SpaceX is also doing some missions with that profile now. But I don't think Pauline would like to make 10 different versions of this shirt for all of the slightly different landing profiles.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's a question from Mark. How many Falcon 9 boosters does SpaceX have? When does that become the limiting factor in the number of launches?
Ooh, boy. They do have a lot of boosters. I think it's about 15 of them. I really don't count them because it's so many that it's like it just really doesn't make any sense to count them. But I think it's around 15, with a couple of them waiting around.
Yeah, it's always kind of a hard thing to count because there are boosters that have been tested in McGregor that are ready for or waiting to fly. There are Falcon Heavy center cores that are lying around, Falcon Heavy side cores that are waiting for their next missions, bunch of Falcon 9s. So it really is kind of hard to count, but SpaceX has a lot of boosters at the moment. And then here's another question from Ryan. Do you see SpaceX continuing to iterate on Falcon 9, such as having the short MVAC engine and other changes like that?
Yeah, it's very likely that they're going to be evolving things like that. It's a very easy change. It doesn't really take a lot. It just takes more on the side of on the side of evaluating how possible that is, right? In terms of manufacturing, you just don't complete the whole extension of the MVAC. It doesn't really affect things like turbo machinery or things like that. It just affects the exterior nozzle. So changes like that is very easy to perform. I do think that there's probably some likelihood that we're going to see more of these.
Yeah, especially as we were talking about earlier, with Falcon 9 probably flying into the 2030s and SpaceX's love for changing stuff and making tweaks, I definitely think we'll see more changes. But with that, we are just over 4 minutes from launch, and that means that our own Max Evans has to head out for launch to take photos and all of that. So, Max, enjoy the launch. See you again post liftoff.
thank you very much, gentlemen. I will see you on the other side.
Yeah. And then right now we have this live view from SpaceX of the payload fairing.
I'm gonna bet on that fairing have been the 10th flight.
Yeah, that is a sooty have.
You can even see the well, we could see the foundations of the crew access tower for Sleek 40 as well, which are nearly complete. We have a flyover that we just released talking a little bit about that. It's not entirely about that. There's more things you will see if you actually check it out.
Indeed. So Alex, now that we're 3 minutes away from launch, can you go through some of the last items that we'll see ahead of a hopeful liftoff in 3 minutes and 17 seconds?
Yeah, so right now they're finishing liquid oxygen load on the first stage. They've already retracted the strong bag as we've seen. The next thing is going to be, well, I just heard stage 1 LOX load is complete, which means that the first stage is now fully loaded with propellants for launch. The second stage is being right now on like the last part of the liquid oxygen load. That is going to end in about 40 to 50 seconds from here. Then at T-1 minute, the ground computers will hand over command to the onboard computers on Falcon 9. The Falcon 9 will also start pressurizing the tanks and all. That is called the startup point in the countdown. A few seconds after that, all the things will be reviewed. Launch director will say go for launch and whatnot. And then we're going to see that launch in just 2 minutes and 17 seconds from now.
Yeah, and right before launch, we have a quick question. What is the highest number of flights that you think a booster will get? So right now they're on 15 flights, and SpaceX has talked about plans to get up to 20. Do you foresee them going past that, Alex?
I think that 20 is probably the maximum that they're going to go for. I do not think they probably need more than 20.
Yeah.
I just heard they call out that stage 2 LOX load is complete, so Falcon 9 is already fully loaded with propellants for flight.
And real quick, we have more gifted memberships from Super Steph. Thank you very much for your support. And again, thank her in chat if you got one of those. Another Red Team membership from Moldy Space Industries, a regular on our stream. Thank you for that. And then a new member as launch director, Nodas Publishing. Thank you as always for your support. And with that, we are 1 minute away from launch of 56 Starlink satellites into a low Earth orbit from the East Coast.
And Falcon 9 is in startup. There we go. We are go for launch.
"30 seconds until launch."
You can see that vapor from the Stromback as they purge lines. The last few seconds here.
"10 seconds."
You'll see those engines starting really soon. There we have engine ignition.
And liftoff. The Falcon 9 has cleared the towers. you are just now joining us, I'm Trevor with NSF as we watch the Falcon 9 launched Starlink Group 5-12. Falcon 9 has just cleared max Q, which is the time of maximum aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. Coming up next are a few events back to back. First, we will have main engine cutoff, also called MECO, which is the shutdown of all 9 engines on the first stage. And if you look close enough, and if we get lucky with views, you'll see that these shut down in pairs. And then shortly after that, we'll have stage separation, quickly followed by second engine ignition on the second stage. And then the booster will then go land on Just Read the Instructions, and the second stage will continue its way to orbit.
You can see there that expansion of the gases as the atmospheric pressure just drops and the exhaust can just freely expand outwards. See some venting there on the left, that is the MVAC engine chill vent. Totally normal and very expected. You're gonna see that series of events.
And there's stage separation. And ignition of the second stage, and right now you will see that ring stiffener just fell off. That is completely nominal. That is to keep vibrations dampened in the bell during liftoff, and there goes the payload fairings. As Alex mentioned, one of those halves flew for the 10th time today. So Alex, could you walk us through the events that we're going to have in the next 5 minutes or so?
Yeah, so right now, as we've seen, the fairings have separated. One of them was flying for a 10th time. The other, I believe it was like 7th time as well. Then we're seeing on the left that booster going into what is called coast phase, basically coasting all the way to apogee, and then coming back down. It'll re-enter back into, through the Earth's atmosphere, and then ignite 3 of its engines for entry burn, as we mentioned before, with the launch and entry landing shirt as well. And that entry burn is actually not 3 engines all the way. It's like 1 engine at the center, then two other engines ignite for 3. And then the shutdown procedure is sort of the similar way, where those 2 other engines shut down. They keep the center one a couple of seconds and then full shutdown. The second stage is continuing into orbit. It should reach approximate, I think it is 299 by 340 kilometer orbit. And from there, it's just going to be deploying those Starlink satellites. Yeah, after the re-entry burn, the first stage is going to use its grid fins and things like that to steer through the atmosphere as it tries to sort of find the drone ship. It doesn't really find it, it's just like flying all the way to the drone ship and perform that landing burn. Hopefully also successful. If it does succeed, I believe it is the 129th consecutive landing, so hopefully, cross our fingers, knock on wood, that happens in just, I think, 3 minutes or so left for that landing.
Oh, that's crazy. And with that, I believe Max Evans is back on commentary. He brought us those awesome live views. Max, how was launch?
Gorgeous as always. We did lose it in the clouds pretty quickly, unfortunately. But the thing about a cloud stealing like this is it actually helps amplify the sound. So it was very, very punchy. But we cannot see the entry burn or the landing burn from here. So it's all down to figments of our imagination or following along with live streams.
Yeah, it's remarkable that just earlier today there was lightning warnings at the Cape, and SpaceX is like, nope, we're going through with a countdown, and we're able to find a window in the weather.
It's Florida weather in the summer. It can change in literally minutes.
Yeah. NASA Kid 23 asks, what is the ring made out of that falls off at second engine start? The ring stiffener. Alex, do we know what the ring is made of?
I think it's made out of cork or something similar. It's a very demisable. Demisable is the name? I don't know. It basically burns off quickly. That the whole idea is that when the engine ignites, it just falls off. And there we go. Entry burn has started. 1 engine, 3 engines. You can even see the line of the 3 engines burning when it happens.
Yeah, the entry burns are really fascinating because what SpaceX is pretty much doing is they're using the engine exhaust as a heat shield for the entire booster during the burn. So, as Jack always says, you're fighting fire with fire, which is awesome.
You see there that is steering, that trying to get into the, because it's loose to one, like it sort of swings to one side as soon as it finishes the re-entry burn, which is bonkers to me that it can do that. They lost the feed.
Yeah, let's hope they get it back so we can see landing. Real quick, Invincible Turtle has a $2 super chat. Rain in Port St. John, will they scrub the launch? Well, thankfully, we can answer that certainly now and say that they did not scrub the launch, but thank you very much for your support. And wow, you can really see in the bits that we have how the booster is at an angle to the atmosphere to get a little bit of lift from the body.
Yeah.
It's an awesome shot.
Should be coming up on the landing burn really soon. It's already below the speed of sound. Look at those clouds coming up. I love it when it's cloudy on the landing zone. It doesn't look as good, but the booster flying through the cloud. Look at that.
Always cool.
Landing burn.
And there's a very rusty just read the instructions. And there we have
go.
Landing confirmation. That is SpaceX's 203rd booster landing and 129th consecutive.
And now the booster gains the /9 on its serial number.
Yeah, and we also just saw second engine cutoff. And there's a view we always like to see, an empty launch pad after a successful launch.
Just heard that they've confirmed good orbit for the second stage, so yay! Now what it's gonna do, it's gonna stay in a very, like, I think it's 45 minutes coast phase. It's gonna reignite the MVAC engine for just a short burn to raise the perigee, the lowest point in the orbit, just really quickly, and that's gonna be the orbit that they're gonna be deploying these satellites on. But obviously, we're not gonna be able to be around for that. Maybe we'll need to strap Jack to a satellite, and then he can shoot the satellite deployment.
I volunteer as tribute.
So back to our earlier conversation about pad turnaround times. We have a question about if 39A didn't have to constantly be converted between Dragon, Falcon 9, and Falcon Heavy, could that TE support the same launch cadence as Slick 40?
Yes, that launchpad was actually built for Falcon Heavy. So when Falcon 9 launches, it's like, haha, it tickles. Like everything, that they do for Falcon 9, like Falcon Heavy is 3 times the power and 3 times the potential to break things and 3 times the everything, right? So when Falcon 9 launches, it's like, 39A just doesn't notice. Because every other launchpad, like 40 and 4 East, are built for Falcon 9 specifically. But if you look at the 39A Stromback, for example, it is armored. Like you can see these plates surrounding the structure of the Stromback. That doesn't occur at any of the other launch pads. So, the difference that you can see there is just how much prepared it is. So I will say that it could probably even do better than Slick 40 if they were actually be able to do it. But sadly, they can't.
Yeah, it's honestly kind of remarkable how overbuilt 39A is in general for Falcon 9. Um, uh, we have another question asking what the nozzles are made out of on Falcon 9.
Well,
Right,
the
we know
regular,
that the second stage is made out
yeah,
of niobium. Is that the same as the first stage?
yeah, the extension, because there's the proper nozzle and then there's the extension of the nozzle. The extension is made out of niobium, but then the proper nozzle is made of a combination of copper and Inconel jacket. So it's basically like a two-wall thing. Where the inner wall, I think the inner wall is the one that is copper and the outer wall is Inconel. In between, if you had a cutout of the bell, I think there's actually some of that out there. You will see these channels for the cooling of the like there's RP1, the kerosene runs through those channels in between those two sections of the nozzle. So yeah.
Yeah. And we have a question from Kerbalistic asking, do you think SpaceX should give the drone ships a nice paint job? And I'm going to use this as an opportunity to talk about the flyover video that we just released, where I don't think there were any drone ships at port, but sometimes we get some nice aerial views of those. So make sure you go check out the latest video from the flyover, and then there is actually a drone ship at port. There is a shortfall of gravitas.
A shortfall, yeah. Should be heading out soon because we're gonna have the next launch from the Cape. I believe it is the launch of ESA's Euclid telescope, and we're gonna be covering it live as well. So it should be releasing soon. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
You know what's
to
releasing
answer your
soon?
question, the drone ships do get. Oh, yeah. I was just gonna say that to answer their question real quick. The drone ships do get painted every now and then, but it's not mission critical, so it's not too often. So anyway, Alex, what is being released pretty soon?
Yeah, because I wrote it. Shortly, I'm not fully sure of how long from now, but in just a few hours, we're releasing the next twist, as we call it, or this week in spaceflight. It is releasing really soon with all the basically a summary of all the news this week. So hopefully you watch that because it's very packed with information lately. There's a lot of things going on.
Yeah. Well, we have two last supports to thank. Jim Cavett on the second time today said, "Go SpaceX, go NSF." So thank you very much, Jim, for your support. It is always appreciated. And then Nikon's in Space has a $5 super chat saying Jack Satellite Strap Fund. So I think we'll definitely try to talk Jack into it. And with that concludes our live launch coverage of today's launch. We encourage you all to go check out the 2023 Spaceport America Cup. Today is their third day of launching. We're going to throw it up in chat, and you can see Jack Beyer, our very own Jack Beyer, and DOS are there. Oh, is that live view? Not 100% sure. Go check that out. Make sure you check out the flyover video and This Week in Spaceflight. I was your host. I am Trevor Sesnick, writer here at NSF. With me was Alex. Alex, thank you very much.
Always a pleasure.
And then finally bringing us the gorgeous views from Cape Canaveral was Max Evans. Max, thank you. Glad you enjoyed and saw another launch.
Oh, pleasure as always. I'm glad to have everyone else with us.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's it. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.